Welcome to the Herman Mudgett experiment. You are listening to the Herman Mudgett experiment.
Yeah. Good weekend and good evening and welcome to the ride. This is the Herman Mudgett experiment. I am Znalda Kolmogrova and I am here with this gentleman who is definitely insightful in his words. It is Yuri Yudin who is going to be joining me tonight to discuss a very interesting incident that took place in the late 1950s. It did not happen in the US of A. As a matter of fact, it took place in Russia. Is that correct?
Russia,
the beautiful state of Russia, in which any day now we might go into World War III. Is that exciting or what? No, I believe this is the Dyatlov Pass Incident that we're going to be covering a little bit of. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Dyatlov Pass Incident, as I said, this happened in the late 1950s. It was a group of hikers, and the outcome of what did take place is an absolutely frightening thing. It seems as though they abandoned their tent in a very big hurry. Some of them were not even dressed in more than their undergarments at the time. Their bodies were found later. Some of the bodies had evidence of radiation. Some of them were missing their tongues and other bizarre beating-looking things. One dude, by the readings here, had a pretty fucked up experience. He had broken ribs, he had a gouged skull, he had his tongue removed. A lot of very strange things going on. Nevertheless, the entire party died except for one person who left the group before the event. They had fallen ill and decided to return home, but everyone else was extremely unlucky in their quest to climb the mountain, which is actually known as the Mountain of Death, where this took place.
The reason they call it the Mountain of Death is simply because things go up there and don't live. It's uninhabited. There aren't animals on the location. I mean, and it's, when you say mountain, I guess if you call the Ozarks mountains, then yeah, it's a mountain, because it's more like a hill, but hey, who's counting? It's definitely an interesting location. You do have a couple factors. You've got some military bases close by. You've got some of the locals that have sighted some Yetis. You've got people that have seen unidentified flying objects floating around there, which may or may not have something to do with the military bases. You have just all these different factors playing into a role with these young kids on this ski team that went out for a hike that may or may not have some kind of effect. What the hell happened to these kids? Why did this kid get beat to a pulp? Why did they cut themselves out of a tent? That's what we're going to talk about today.
And I believe from what we've discussed just a little bit previously, you have your own theories on what maybe these college kids might have done in their excursion?
Well, yes, and like you've got the theory of the Yeti. They spoke about a Yeti. They've got a photo supposedly of this Yeti that comes and later just absolutely mauls them. And hey, it's definitely possible. This is the late 50s. This is Russia. Early 60s areas. I mean, I'm wondering what kind of psychotropic drugs were possible to them. What My opinion is maybe they got so fucked up and high that they just beat the piss out of each other and climbed trees and died of hypothermia and bit their tongues off, for all I know.
It's definitely interesting to think that maybe if one person goes nuts and starts bashing some skulls in, why the other people would take the time to cut themselves out of the tent and face the hypothermia that eventually did kill a huge amount of these people. Why would they not just fight back against this one person and maybe take control again? Would the psychedelic drugs actually influence them to think that there is no chance of facing off with this person? And so they'd rather face the elements at negative 15 degrees and then some?
Well, yeah. You know, when the schnozberries taste like schnozberries and someone rips ass in a small enclosed tent, shit gets real fast, man.
Real shit, real fast. Yeah, definitely. It could be a possibility where the psychedelic drugs influenced these people or one person to go on a murder spree while the rest of them were so vulnerable that they couldn't really hack the reality of maybe just fighting back. Myself finds a theory of a Yeti a lot more fascinating. Of course, it doesn't correlate with the lines of the radiation that was involved with some of these corpses that were found. And I must be mistaking this with another event, but I remember a similar event where hikers were found and their bodies were literally burned and scourged with what looked like some sort of radioactive energy.
I do know that the bodies appeared to have been burned, like some of the clothing was burned off, and that is an interesting situation. I know they had hair, but you're talking. I mean, what's the time frame between when they found the corpses and when the death actually occurred? How long did those bodies sit out there in that situation? What types of animals got to them?
And of course, you did say that on this mountain of death, there is known to be pretty much no animals around.
Yeah, that's pretty much why it's uninhabited. There's nothing there.
Right. And a lot of these details seem to have come to light in the 1990s. Why it would wait that long, who knows, unless there was some sort of extra, I want to say extraterrestrial, but extra events in general going on with this. A lot of it does seem to sound a lot more like an extraterrestrial attack when it comes to the condition of the bodies that were found. And, of course, throughout the United States, there's always livestock or actual humans that are found in much the same condition, with organs missing or their tongues missing or their eyeballs are gone, and the bodies do look burned. Another weird aspect with this Dyatlov Pass incident is that some of the skiers were wearing clothes that belonged to other members of the party. So it's pretty weird to think that maybe they were out there suffering together and hiding from whatever had attacked their tent or whatever had taken place at their base camp, and they were actually exchanging clothes with each other to keep the other alive or something to that effect. But it's definitely weird that they were wearing each other's clothing.
Yeah, now don't discredit the Yeti by any stretch, because, I mean, where they spoke about it, where they supposedly had a picture, this is in their journals. They were joking about it, and I could see a bunch of guys with a couple of cute girls, you know, hey, let's scare them and have fun with them. I could totally see that happening, you know, and
Different times, huh? Like,
Sure.
we're gonna creep them out. There's Yeti.
And it's amazing, but, you know, the same things happen today. The same things happen over and over. Let's go out to the middle of nowhere and scare each other. And that's the typical type of stuff that teenagers and young men and women did of the time. But the Yeti is a plausible option, which would, in fact, cover that. The military thing would also cover that. Now, if they got too close and saw something they shouldn't see, maybe it was a snuff job. Maybe there was a bomb that went off, because I do know that large bombs, and there were craters, large bombs can deform bodies like that. Not removing tongues, but crushing skulls and, you know, carnage and maiming and breaking ribs and making the guys looked like they were under 700 tons of rocks or whatnot. I could see these are all viable options here.
Of course, my most favorite, as I've said, is the Yeti, just because I'm fascinated with the creature itself. Essentially, you have a Bigfoot, but it's not so much hiding out in the brazen, thick wilderness where nobody really goes. It's hiding out deep in the peaks where nobody goes, where the temperatures are absolutely excruciating and you can't survive without the right gear. And the fur isn't brown and blending into the forest, it's white, blending into the snow. And you never know if these creatures do exist, which of course there's supposed sightings and incidences with Yeti throughout time. But these things really freak me out at the idea of the cold winter blowing and a storm coming in. But this thing is out there, and it's doing whatever it is doing, whether it's ready to fuck up some strangers, or it's hunting for food and something to eat, or it's just out there living its own life and happens to have an altercation with these humans. But I just love the idea of this huge, strong, hairy creature being out there in the snow, almost like a polar bear blending in. I love that. It's more intriguing to me than just the American forest, but that's just me.
It happens to me when I frolic in the snow on occasion. I get blamed for being a Yeti.
It's those huge feet you have.
Yeah, true story. So, okay, so we've got this Yeti, and these Yetis are these ape-like creatures with ridiculous strength. Some of them throw rocks. Hey, you know, piss off a Yeti and he throws a boulder at your head, it's going to fuck you up. That's just all there is to it. Maybe went sniffing around inside their tent. I know if a Yeti stuck its head into my tent, I would be for getting the fuck out of Dodge.
You wouldn't hug and kiss it?
Negative.
Huh, weird.
No hugs, no kisses. These Yetis, they are territorial. And now, talking of whether they exist or not, that's fine. If you choose to believe in Bigfoot, then you actually are in the majority, because there are more people that believe in Bigfoot than there are that believe that Hillary Clinton is honest.
Shit.
So just consider yourself in the majority here. It's way too many stories from way too many different groups of people from way too many locations in the world to discredit the fact that they could not exist. When we're to this very day, in 2016, still finding new animals and still haven't fully looked at every location and area in the world, it's definitely possible, and why wouldn't it be? I mean, seems like a great story. So, were they in the wrong place at the wrong time, and something happened where Mr. Yeti decided to make them his love dolls and didn't realize that their heads would pop off? Definite possibility. Definite possibility.
So, something you mentioned to me earlier, one of the rescuers or so said that they would not really participate in the removal of the bodies unless they were put in lead coffins. Is that right?
Yeah, as a military pilot who was flying their bodies back, refused to haul the corpses without first putting them in lead boxes.
So I would think then with that there is, upon studying, a huge amount of radiation coming off of these corpses, which of course I don't know what that would have to do with Yeti, but definitely it could point to the UFO activity that I was relating to earlier. There's usually a lot of radiation burns in UFO abduction victims, or even people that fall into the light that is shined down on them from UFOs and stuff of that nature. So a lot of that, from the condition that the corpses ended up in and the radiation and the missing organs, a lot of that seems to point to some UFO activity in the hood.
Agreed. With the military base being right there as well. They usually tend to go hand in hand as well, because, you know, they're doing experimental things. Now, I wonder, what are the effects of radiation? Maybe they found themselves in the middle of some form of radiation and that made them go crazy.
All right.
Is that possible?
Nothing is possible. Everything is impossible.
Okay. So let's say, for example, we're hiking, getting cold, time for nighttime. We set our shoes up in perfect rows, everything's organized, got the clothes off, and all of a sudden the floor starts glowing green, and we start going fucking crazy.
Right. That's the beautiful part of this story in particular is every single option seems to point to something that's fascinating and freaky at the same time. Whether they were discovered by aliens or a military drill that was like, fuck these people, we're going to experiment on them. Whether a Yeti attacked them or whether they just set up base camp over the top of some sort of energy that we know nothing about.
Yeah, and I know they've suggested the idea that maybe it was possibly an avalanche of snow because they were at the bottom of a hill and they thought maybe the snow come crashing down and they heard it coming and they all split, and it tore stuff up because when they did find the tent, it was covered in some deep-ass snow. The only problem with that theory is the hill that they were at the base of was just teeny tiny, and I doubt that it could have even mustered up enough snow to be able to cause any kind of problems, let alone crush them to the extent that they were hurt.
Right. Of course, this is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and there are others, I believe, that are like this throughout time, stuff like that. The era it takes place in is absolutely frightening. The possibilities of what could have happened to these hikers is really creepy. If you, exploring mountains, especially snowy mountains in general, always leads to some sort of frightening story, whether it's people disappearing or entire groups of people ending up in catastrophes. You never know how much cannibalism has had to take place in order for people to survive. You even have the story from the book Alive, I believe. I'm not sure if it's Krakauer who wrote that, but the book where there was a plane crash and they had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive. And you have the Donner Party that were trying to make their way west when they were stranded up at Donner Pass. Now it's near Truckee, California. It's on the other side of Nevada. So basically the moral of the story is don't fuck around in the mountains, and if you do, maybe videotape every damn thing, because there always leads to be some sort of really bizarre incident that could take place. And people disappear, people freeze to death. It seems the majority of the people who were involved in this Dyatlov Pass incident, a lot of them died from hypothermia after they fled their tent. And so there is a lot that can happen up in the mountains, and no one will ever know.
I have to say, it's not always wrong to have a little bit of cannibalism. Get some fava beans and a nice bottle of Chianti.
Delicious.
So, we're not talking down on you cannibals. Just saying. It can happen. Be aware. And get your GoPros out there, man. No excuse for you fucktards to be out there and about in the middle of nowhere and have a shitty-ass grainy camera. I am sick of this shit. Somebody needs to get a 4K fucking camera of Mr. Yeti himself, Sasquatch, and put that shit to an end. Please.
Until then, we're just not going to believe you. Yep, we are non-believers. But, there could be a lot going on. What time are we at, sir? We're definitely looking into seeing what's going on. We've got a lot going on tonight. We have a lot to research. Might not be able to stick.
18 minutes.
Oh my goodness. It's about a good time to call it quits. This is a lot to think about. If you have your opinions, your own experiences, of course, are always important. Now, no lying. Just tell us the truth.
And if you lived through the Dyatlov Pass and have something to add to our little story here, please feel free to contact us and let us know how it actually went down.
Preferably not in Russian.
Well, yeah, and preferably without the lead boxes.
That is a very, very important factor. We don't need any more lead boxes taking place. We're just going to try to keep everything peaceful, even though it won't stay that way. And we'll try to keep it as weird as possible, though. So, bring the lead boxes. Fuck it. Let's just keep it interesting.
Shit. And on that note, it is my duty to tell you that it is so very important for you to mudgitate.
You should do so at least 20 minutes a day because it is very good for the heart, the mind, the body,
and the soul.
Thanks a lot for tuning in. If you got anything, hit us up and have a horrible night.
Keep your tongues, people.
Herman Mudgett Experiment. Herman